6 white men sat in a basement in Memphis, Tennessee, plotting a murder. Their target was Nat King Cole, the most famous black entertainer in America, the man whose voice made white women swoon and whose success enraged white men. The plan was simple: wait until after the concert, follow him to his car, beat him to death with baseball bats, and send a message that black performers were not welcome in the South. What they didn't plan for was Bumpy Johnson. When Bumpy heard that Harlem's greatest singer was being hunted, he didn't make a phone call. He didn't send a message. He got on a train, traveled 1,000 miles, and walked into that basement 3 days before the concert. He didn't bring a bat. He brought his razor. And what happened in that basement made 6 racists realize they had made the last mistake of their lives. September 1950, Memphis, Tennessee. Nat King Cole was 31 years old and at the height of his career. Mona Lisa had just topped the charts, the first time a black artist had achieved that level of mainstream success. His voice was smooth as silk. His piano playing was brilliant. His crossover appeal was unprecedented. White audiences loved him, and that was exactly the problem. In 1950, the South was a powder keg. The civil rights movement was beginning to stir. Black artists were achieving success that made them visible, powerful, and threatening to the racial order white supremacists had built their world around. Nat King Cole represented everything they feared: a black man who was wealthy, famous, talented, and adored by white women. A black man who didn't know his place. A black man who dared to be excellent. So when his tour announced a stop at Ellis Auditorium in Memphis on September 17th, certain people decided to make a statement. September 8th, 1950, 9:45 p.m., Garrett's Steakhouse, downtown Memphis. Marcus Webb moved through the dining room like a ghost scene, but not noticed. The way black waiters had learned to exist in white spaces. Marcus was 34 years old and had worked at Garrett's for 6 years. It was one of the finest restaurants in Memphis. Whites only. Expensive steaks, bourbon that cost more per glass than Marcus earned in a day. The kind of place where powerful men gathered to discuss business, politics, and other things they didn't want overheard. Except Marcus heard everything. Table 7 had been drinking since 7 p.m., 6 white men in expensive suits, cigars in hand, their laughter growing louder with every round. Marcus knew the type: businessmen, professionals, men who owned things, property, companies, people. As Marcus refilled their bourbon glasses, he kept his face neutral and his ears open. That colored boy thinks he can just waltz into Memphis and sing for white women, said the thick-necked man at the head of the table. Thomas Crenshaw. Marcus knew him, a construction company owner with money and a reputation for cruelty. Nat King Cole, Edward Willis added, the bank manager, making millions off our people. It's an insult. Someone should teach him a lesson. Robert Hayes muttered. We will, said David Morrison, and Marcus felt his blood run cold. Morrison was a detective with the Memphis Police Department. Everyone in the black community knew his name and his reputation for brutality. Thursday night. Carl's basement. 9 p.m. We finalized the plan. Baseball bats, another man said. James Tucker, the lumberyard owner. Simple, effective. After the concert. Parking lot. Done. Tay laughed. Marcus kept pouring, kept his face blank, kept his breathing steady. The 6th man, Carl Jennings, the hardware store owner, raised his glass. To sending a message, to putting that uppity underscore back in his place, Crenshaw added. They drank. Marcus refilled their glasses. His hands didn't shake. They couldn't. Not here. Not now. But his mind was racing. Nat King Cole. Concert. Baseball bats. Murder. At 11:30 p.m. After table 7 finally left, Marcus found the payphone in the kitchen. His hands were shaking now. He dialed a number he had memorized 3 years earlier, given to him by a Pullman porter, who had said, if you ever hear something important, something dangerous, you call this number. Ask for Bumpy Johnson. The phone rang 3 times. A deep voice answered. Yeah, Mr. Johnson, Marcus said quietly. My name is Marcus Webb. I work at a restaurant in Memphis. I just heard something you need to know. It's about Nat King Cole. There was a pause. I'm listening. Marcus told him everything, the 6 men, their names, the Thursday meeting in Carl Jennings's hardware store basement, the baseball bats, the parking lot plan, the September 17th concert. When he finished, Bumpy Johnson was silent for a long moment. You got faces for these names? Yes, sir. I served them all night. I know every one of them. One's a police detective. David Morrison. Good, Bumpy said. Marcus, you did the right thing calling me. Now listen carefully. You forget this conversation ever happened. You go to work tomorrow like normal. You don't tell anyone what you heard. You understand? Yes, sir. If anything happens, if these men suspect you heard them, you call this number immediately. I'll handle it, Mr. Johnson. Are you going to stop them? Bumpy's voice turned cold. I'm going to do more than stop them. I'm going to make sure they never threaten another black artist as long as they live. The line went dead. Marcus hung up, his hands still shaking. He didn't know who Bumpy Johnson really was. Just a name, a number, a voice in the dark. But something in that voice told him Nat King Cole was going to be safe. Bumpy Johnson sat in silence for a full minute after hanging up. At 35 years old, he was Harlem's undisputed king. 3 years out of Sing Sing, he had taken over the numbers racket, built a protection network, and made it clear to every gangster in New York that Harlem belonged to him. But Memphis was 1,000 miles away. The concert was 9 days out, and 6 races with police protections were planning to murder Nat King Cole. Bumpy looked at the money on his desk. $18,000 from the week's numbers take. Enough to buy a small building. Enough to expand his operation. Enough to matter. He pushed it aside. At 5 a.m., Bumpy packed 2 suits, toiletries, his straight razor, and a .38 revolver. At 6 a.m., he boarded the southbound train from Penn Station to Memphis. 40 hours, 6 states. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. He didn't need to. Claire would handle Harlem while he was gone, because some things were more important than business. Some things were worth 1,000 miles and every dollar in his pocket. Nat King Cole's voice was one of those things. 40 hours after leaving Harlem, Steve stepped off the train at Memphis Union Station. The heat hit him immediately. Southern heat, thick and wet. Nothing like New York. He checked into a colored boarding house on Bill Street under the name William Jackson. Paid cash for a week and went to work by Monday afternoon. Bumpy had made his first contact. Samuel Sweet Sam Johnson, a barber who had worked Harlem in the 1930s before moving back home to Memphis. Sam owed Bumpy a favor from the old days. Bumpy walked into Sam's barber shop at 3 p.m. The shop went quiet. Sam looked up from the customer. He was shaving and went pale. Bumpy Johnson. Lord have mercy. After the shop closed, they talked. Bumpy gave him the names Marcus had provided. Sam filled in the details. Thomas Crenshaw Construction. Money, racist, connected to the White Citizens Council. Edward Willis Bank Manager, financing segregation efforts. Robert Hayes Insurance, quietly brutal. James Tucker Lumber, supplies the wood for Klan crosses. David Morrison Detective, the muscle, the one who would make sure it looked like an accident. Carl Jennings Hardware Store, meeting location. They're serious. Bumpy, Sam said quietly. The Citizens Council's been talking about making an example. Nat Cole's the perfect target. Famous enough to matter. Black enough to hate. Where's Jennings' store? Sam drew him a map. September 11th through 13th, Monday through Wednesday. For 3 days, Bumpy became a ghost in Memphis. He watched Carl Jennings' hardware store, learned the layout, found the basement entrance through the back alley unlocked. No security, amateurs. He paid $20 to a cleaning woman at First National Bank, who confirmed Edward Willis's schedule, his routine, his weaknesses. He tracked David Morrison, followed him from the precinct to Murphy's Tavern, where the detective drank every night after his shift. By Wednesday evening, September 13th, Bumpy had everything. 6 names, 6 faces, 6 targets. Meeting Thursday, September 14th, 9 p.m., Jennings Hardware Basement. Concert Sunday, September 17th, Ellis Auditorium. Plan: baseball bats. Parking lot ambush after the show. Bumpy had one day to stop them. One night to end this before it began. September 14th, 1950. Thursday, 8:45 p.m. Bumpy stood in the alley behind Jennings Hardware, dressed in black. In his right hand, his razor. In his waistband, the .38 dot. At 9:10 p.m., all 6 men had arrived. Bumpy could hear them through the basement window, laughing, joking about what they would do to that colored boy. The back door was unlocked. He stepped inside. The basement was lit by a single hanging bulb. 6 men sat around a wooden table. 6 baseball bats leaned against the wall. A map of Ellis Auditorium lay spread out, an X marking the parking spot where they planned to kill Nat King Cole. They were so focused on their planning, they didn't hear. The door opened. Bumpy closed it. The soft click made them turn. 6 white faces. 1 black man. 3 seconds of silence. Then Thomas Crenshaw stood, his chair scraping. "Who the hell are you? This is private." Bumpy walked to the table and placed his razor on top of the map, directly over the X. "Sit down," he said quietly. Crenshaw didn't sit. "I don't know who you think." Bumpy pulled the .38 from his waistband and held it casually at his side. "I said, sit the underscore down." Crenshaw sat. Bumpy looked around the table. 6 men, all bigger than him, all with weapons within reach, all terrified. "My name's Bumpy Johnson. I'm from Harlem, New York, and I'm here because I heard you gentlemen are planning to murder Nat King Cole." Edward Willis tried to speak. "We don't know. Don't lie to me," Bumpy said, his voice cutting through the room. "I know your names. Thomas Crenshaw, Edward Willis, Robert Hayes, James Tucker, David Morrison. Yes, detective. I know you're a cop, ain't Carl Jennings, stupid enough to host a murder conspiracy in his own basement." He gestured to the bats. "I know you bought 6 Louisville sluggers. I know the plan. Wait until after the concert. Follow Nat to his car. Beat him to death. Send a message." 6 men exchanged looks. Edward Willis's hand moved toward his hip, where his service weapon should have been. He had left it at the station, not wanting to bring it to a private meeting. "Looking for this?" Bumpy tapped his .38. "I'm armed, detective. You're not. So sit still and shut up." Morrison's hand froze. "Here's what's going to happen," Bumpy continued, his voice calm, almost friendly. Made it worse. On September 17th, Nat King Cole is going to walk into that auditorium. He's going to perform. He's going to walk out. And he's going to leave Memphis without a scratch. Thomas Crenshaw found either courage or stupidity. He reached for one of the baseball bats. Bumpy's hand moved up with the gun. With the razor, the blade flashed. Crenshaw screamed. A deep cut opened across his forearm. Not deep enough to sever tendons, but deep enough to bleed and scar forever. Crenshaw collapsed back into his chair, clutching his arm as blood dripped onto the floor. Bumpy held up the razor, now red. "Anyone else want to try?" Nobody moved. "Good. Now, let me explain something. You 6 think you're dangerous because you have bats, numbers, and a cop on your side. But let me tell you what real danger is." Bumpy walked slowly around the table, razor in one hand, gun in the other. Real danger is a man who traveled 1,000 miles to protect someone he's never met. Real danger is a man who's killed more people than you threatened. Real danger is me, right now, deciding whether you 6 deserve to keep breathing. He stopped behind Robert Hayes and placed the razor against his throat. Hayes went rigid, eyes wide. This blade has opened 37 throats in Harlem. Men tougher than you. Men smarter than you. You know what they all had in common? Silence. Just Hayes's ragged breathing. They forgot that some people are protected, that some lines you don't cross. He pressed the razor just hard enough to draw a thin line of blood. Hayes made a sound somewhere between a whimper and a sob. Nat King Cole is one of those people. He's Harlem's voice, Harlem's pride, and Harlem protects its own even 1,000 miles from home. Bumpy released Hayes. Hayes slumped forward, a hand flying to his bleeding neck. A dark stain spread across James Tucker's pants. He'd pissed himself. Now, here's the new plan, Bumpy said. On September 17th, none of you will be anywhere near that auditorium. You'll be at home, at work, at church, but you won't be within a mile of Nat King Cole. And if we refuse? Willis's voice was barely a whisper. Then I kill all 6 of you. Bumpy said it like he was discussing the weather. Not today. Maybe not tomorrow, but I will hunt you down one by one, and I will end you. He walked back to the table, picked up the map, and tore it in half. I know where you live. I know where you work. I know where your children go to school. Edward Willis, your daughter, takes piano lessons on Tuesdays at Mrs. Henderson's house on Poplar Street. Carl Jennings, your wife, shops at Cooper's Market every Saturday morning. David Morrison, you drink at Murphy's Tavern every night after your shift. Their faces went ashen. If anything happens to Nat King Cole in Memphis, in Tennessee, anywhere in this country, I'm going to assume it was you, and I will come back not with a razor, with gasoline and matches. Bumpy moved to the door, then stopped. One more thing. Thomas Crenshaw is bleeding. Get him bandaged. Tell the hospital he cut himself on broken glass. Because if anyone hears about this meeting, if this becomes a police report or a newspaper story, I'll assume one of you talked. And talking has consequences. He looked at each man one final time. September 17th. Stay home. Stay alive. Bumpy walked out into the Memphis night. September 17th, 1950. Sunday, Ellis Auditorium. Bumpy had been watching the auditorium since 2 p.m. Positioned across the street, eyes scanning every entrance, every face, every car that pulled into the parking lot. At 7:30 p.m., Nat King Cole arrived in a black Cadillac. He stepped out, waved to the small crowd of fans who had gathered, and smiled that famous smile. Bumpy watched the crowd, scanned faces, looked for the 6. They weren't there. At 8 p.m., Nat walked onto the stage. 2,000 people rose in a standing ovation before he even sat at the piano. Bumpy slipped inside and stood at the back of the auditorium. Nat began to play. Mona Lisa, Mona Lisa, men have named you. His voice filled the space smooth, perfect, effortless. Every note was a reminder of why Bumpy had traveled 1,000 miles. Why he had walked into a basement with 6 racists. Why he had risked everything. Because this voice, this talent, was too precious to lose. After the concert, Nat signed autographs in the parking lot, laughed with fans, posed for photographs, got into his Cadillac, and drove safely to his hotel. Bumpy watched until the taillights disappeared. Then he walked to the train station and caught the midnight train back to Harlem. Nat King Cole never knew about the basement, never knew about the 6 men with baseball bats, never knew that Bumpy Johnson had traveled 1,000 miles and spilled blood to save his life. He only knew his Memphis concert went perfectly, that the audience loved him, that he felt safe. Years later, 1963, 2 years before his death from lung cancer, Nat was being interviewed by Ebony magazine. The journalist asked, "You toured the South during the most dangerous years for black performers. Were you ever afraid?" Nat smiled, that gentle smile. "You know, I should have been. The threats were real. The hatred was real. But somehow I always felt protected, like guardian angels were watching over me. guardian angels. Maybe not angels, Nat said thoughtfully. Maybe just good people. People I never met. People who believe that music matters more than hate. That beauty is worth protecting. He looked out the window. I like to think that somewhere out there, people were fighting for me when I didn't even know I needed fighting for. That's faith. That's love. That's what kept me singing. He was right. That something, that someone, was Bumpy Johnson, carrying a razor and a promise. Harlem's artists were protected, even 1,000 miles from home, in the Memphis boarding house where Bumpy had stayed. The landlady found something after he checked out, an envelope with $100 in cash and a note for Marcus Webb's family. Tell him William Jackson says, thank you. The landlady gave the money to Sweet Sam, who tracked down Marcus. Marcus opened the envelope, read the note, and understood. The voice on the phone had been real. The protection had been real. Nat King Cole had been saved by a man he would never meet. As for the 6 men in the basement, Thomas Crenshaw's arm never healed right. The scar ran from wrist to elbow, thick and ugly. Robert Hayes left Memphis 6 months later, moved to Oklahoma, and never spoke of that September night. David Morrison resigned from the police force in 1951, citing personal reasons. The others stayed in Memphis, stayed quiet, stayed away from black entertainers, and whenever Nat King Cole's name came up on the radio, in the newspapers, in conversations, they changed the subject quickly, because they remembered the man with the razor, and they knew he kept his promises. September 1950, Memphis, Tennessee. The night 6 racists planned a murder, and Bumpy Johnson stopped it before it began. The night one man's blood was spilled, so another man's voice could sing. The night a waiter made a phone call that changed everything. This is the story Nat King Cole never knew. The guardian angel he never met. The protection he never saw. But Harlem knew. Memphis knew. And every racist in the South learned, you can hate, you can threaten, you can plan, but Harlem's artists are protected, always, forever, even 1,000 miles from home. That's not just protection, that's love, and that's power. If this story of courage, sacrifice, and silent heroism moved you, hit that subscribe button and smash that like. Share this with someone who needs to understand that real heroes don't always get credit. They just get the job done. Drop a comment. Have you ever been protected by someone you never knew was there? Let's keep these untold stories alive.